the rhythm, catching every beat. Together we embrace the futures at our feet. The futures at our feet.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. You will see from your screen, it is just me and one guest. We have given Ben some well-deserved rest. I won't give into too much because we're always recording all year, and I always say, "Oh, this is when we're recording," and it just throws. I won't go into Schrodinger's cat and all of those different things that me and Ben have talked about a million different times. But yeah, Ben is taking a well-deserved break with the family, and I'm on my own. He's trusted me to be on my own, Steve. So we'll get started pretty quickly. But yeah, it's been a privilege. We have worked with Crown House Publishing for such a long period of time now in regards to discussions with authors, and every now and again they'll drop a book and they'll say, "What do you think of this?" And we'll go, "Absolutely, that looks unbelievable. Let's get that person on." So yeah, Steve Baker. It's been great to look through the book. It's been great to read us and go through it. But do an introduction to yourself. And then we'll delve into the book, the why, the what, the how, and all of those different things as well.
Sure, Steve, will do. Well, thank you. Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, I join you from Anglesey, where I live here on the farm with my partner, Sian. I was a secondary teacher for 17 years, English and drama. I was a head of year for 10 years, charging around with my fireman's hat, my fireman's hose from incident to incident. I then went over to the dark side, joined the local authority in Wakefield, behaviour and attendance consultant. And then for a while, I had delusions of adequacy because I was regional advisor with the National Strategies of Behaviour and Attendance. But I've been a freelance behaviour and attendance consultant ever since, which led to me publishing the other book, the Behaviour one, a couple of years ago. But I've always written comedy in one way or another, like pantos for a local whammy group, that kind of thing. And this is my first attempt at getting published in comedy, really. And because I think I got Crown House's ear because the Behaviour Book, they like that. It's been very well received, I'm pleased to say. And so they gave me house room. I was able to at least run the book by them. And yeah, I'm thrilled to say it's got published. So yeah, that's me. Granddad now. Bit of a music fan. You can probably see the CDs behind me.
Absolutely loads of them. Absolutely loads of them. So
yeah, old guy.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely fine as well.
Old school.
Sure, yeah, LPs and
that's it. There's a few in the corner,
CDs and all those kind of things. But yeah, I'm really interested in terms of the book and the title Outstanding. We'll start potentially how did the book land, and we'll go into what the book covers and the satire and all the different humour on it. But where did it? And then we've kind of just been talking about it off air. But where did it come from? And also the title. How does that relate? Is it relating to the thing that we no longer talk about in terms of grading, or everything else?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I was one of those people, as I say, I've done a lot of writing, but basically to amuse friends, things, poems for special occasions, and pantos, as I say. And then I answered that ad you might have seen in the corner of the newspaper page. It said, "Why not be a writer?" And I thought, yeah, why not? Let's have a go. So I wrote off and joined this correspondence course. And a few tasks in, the task was to plan out a novel. So I sat there with this sort of piece of paper, and from chapter 1 to chapter 35, 36, whatever I've ended up with. And I basically plotted out this novel. I started with this crazy ending. I knew it was going to be a comedy because I'm just that way out. And it would be a farcical conflagration. I'm a big fan of Tom Sharp, who he's probably passed away now, I imagine, but wrote sort of crazy farces in the past. And it took shape from there. I've had the benefit of, I went through some editing with Cornerstone's literary agency some years ago. And I've had a lot of input from Crown House. We've developed it. And yeah, that's what it came from. As for the title, I suppose, yes. Now, of course, the one-word judgment has gone. But the book began under a regime where the one-word judgment was still very much with us. I suppose it's, to some extent, it's ironic, really, because this clearly isn't an outstanding school. It's a failing school. But I hope that outstanding might be, without making a dreadful pun, I thought it might stand out, on the bookshelf, so to speak. It's a striking title. So yeah, there's that. It's all about an inspection, so it's all about that pressure. It's all about the fear of the judgment. And I thought giving it that one title was just a snappy way to grab people's attention.
Yeah, I think if anybody's picking it up thinking it's going to be a manual,
How
and it's an outdated manual now, very very
not
quickly,
to?
but yeah, I think, and in the, I suppose the question, I suppose one of the, and one of the things that I want to pick us as outstanding as Camp gone, the book in terms of what its approach as a whole, in terms of its satire, in terms of its comedy, in terms of adding all of the different things. I don't want to give too much in, but why does it? Why should people read it, and how does it relate to? Is it hoping that people that are going through that experience can at least laugh when they've been through it, or in terms of that inspection process and period?
I think its prime reason for existence is to make people laugh. Um, and I honestly do believe it's full of belly laughs, I would like to think. But you couldn't really write this book about education without tackling some darker themes, especially some of the things that happened with regard to OfSTED, tragic things that happened to OfSTED with regard to OfSTED in recent months and years. So I think people will take away. I hope they're going to feel good having had a good old laugh, but also if you're a teacher that if you're a teacher or a teaching assistant, someone who cares about children, you might get regarded as a bit of a maverick. That certainly happened to me in some schools. And I hope you'll come away feeling encouraged. You've got Miss Cardew, that wonderful woman who's working with her sort of her learning support group. The Bobby Joes and the Kevins. I'd like to think it comes through my respect for that woman and the job she's doing. And there's that crying teacher that Martin Fisher, the young Ofsted inspector, well, youngish, comes across. She's crying in her classroom at the end of the day. And I hope that my respect for and admiration for people that are battling in very, very difficult circumstances. And they're not based on any one person I've met, but they're drawn from my experience in supporting schools over the last longer than I care to think about. So I hope people come away feeling encouraged and reassured and rearmed, as well as having a good old laugh.
Yeah, and I think having laughter. I was watching and have been watching. Is it Last One Laughing UK? Don't know
Oh
if
yeah,
you've. So I've been watching that, and I was picking it up, and then I looked at that, and I'm a big fan of Bob Mortimer and his
oh yeah,
his whole like ditties and the stuff that he's done for such a period of time. And I was I was laughing, thinking, I, I don't know why, but in my head I'm thinking Bob Mortimer with some of the examples, especially some of the names, because he just goes to the complete obscure, and I think there's so many obscure names within the book, but also not only the humour, and we keep going back to that. I think that's a bit that just like I'm not always a fiction individual. I'm more of a
yeah,
leadership book. I'm a bit of a boring. I'm autobiographies, but the thing that made me laugh is that just
yeah,
the link to humour. Um, and I think it's one of the quite early in the book where it talks about trousers down and the misinterpretation of that whole conversation in regards to they'll do this and I was like, I think it's all of the links there. Sorry, I'm going quiet, but yeah, I think, but I think what's really relevant is the other side of the coin, the humour of inspection and inspectorate and the inspector themselves in regards to the naive inspector, but also how often, because every inspector has to start somewhere, and do the individuals, apart from when I can't remember, it's been that long since I've been in education, did they get basically a bio of every single inspection or inspector? Somebody's at my doorway. I'm not going to go get it, everybody, if you heard that, and the dog will be barking,
okay,
but we'll keep going. But yeah, I think it's that link to, as well as the teachers and the head and the leadership and everybody in the school are going through it, so is the inspector. And have we forgotten that actually, as this process kind of unfolds and we still think, oh, Ofsted is this negative thing that goes in, but actually somebody's there
yeah,
just trying to do a job.
yeah, yeah. I was involved when I worked for the National Strategies. We were doing these so-called deep dives, and that you visit the schools at a high level of persistent absence. And I visited this comp in Leeds. I won't say which one. I'm sure it's very different now. And it was awful. I spent the day interviewing groups of people. You'd meet the attendance officers, you'd meet the attendance leader, you talk to a group of staff, talk to some students, just to get a feel for how attendance is being promoted within the school. And almost every team that came into the boardroom sat with me said, "Can we shut the door?" Because what they had to say about the leadership team, the head in particular, was so negative. And at the end of the day, I had to sit at the head of the board and I had to I had to reflect this back. And I had to talk about what had been said to me, not naming names, obviously, because people have spoken to me. They trusted me in confidence. But I had to give very, very difficult feedback. And I felt tremendously. I mean, the deputy heads at the other end of the table, poor woman was sobbing. And I did not come away feeling poor me. I felt for them. It was unfortunate. I simply had to deliver the ugly truths. But yes, it wasn't a pleasant experience for me either. And it's not, I'm lucky now. I get to work with schools in a way that's much more supportive, because that's all I ever want to do is be supportive and developmental and solution focused. I don't want to hold people's toes to the fire in the way that the senior inspector in the book, Arthur Nally, does. So yes, it could be. I think our sympathy has to be with the schools, but there are human beings involved as well at both ends. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's the book plays a role in trying to identify every role each person plays in the process in regards to actually, it's run at the same point of, imagine if you are listening and you've led a school for an inspection, and the TV crew is thrown into the mix. And a terrible TV crew that would disrupt any school, but also like it unpicks responsibility and individual responsibility within those organisations, and it unpicks all the different bits of actually the pressure that every individual on the school side of the inspection faces, and also if somebody doesn't take individual responsibility, what does that look like, and passing the book and all of those different things. I think that's a real challenge, isn't it? That if you as a leader kind of say, well, it's not my fault and everything else, what does that do for the rest of the mechanism and every cog within that school vehicle? Maybe touch upon that, because I think that's a real thing that pulls out of the book, even with the humour that's within it.
That's interesting. And of course, sometimes it works the other way. I don't want to alienate the audience, but sometimes it's frontline staff who don't want to take responsibility. I understand they're under the hammer, they're under the cosh, banging them in 5 lessons if you're secondary, banging them out 5 lessons a day. That's the toughest job in a school. And you might want to just say, as I did at the start of my career, if I'm honest, take this child away, bring it back when it's fixed. And you do go to schools where sort of compassion has been contracted out almost to a particular team, and then you get that them and us between pastoral and teachers, and the whole thing can fall apart. So I think leadership teams have to model that taking of responsibility. They have to be the change they want to see.
Yeah. And that's really relevant, actually. We've had quite a few, I won't say behavioural experts, and I don't want to go back to the old book and some of the work, but I do the Paul Dick's stuff, and I used to work for a multi-academy trust and as chair of governors, and one of the people that within that school was Dave Whittaker, and Dave's obviously and all of those kind of things.
Fantastic.
Unbelievable book. Unbelievable book. And I think it's that thing, isn't it, of the true realisation with the pressure of OfSTED, what that leads in terms of those leadership decisions, and based on behaviour, if there's any behavioural issues, there are behavioural issues in school, but that whole off-rolling and making sure that those kids don't get anywhere near the school, because we don't want to show really what that bit is, and I think that comes out, doesn't it? Of what do we do with it? What do we do with these kids? Because they can't be seen. I'm like, well, I know that you're potentially going to get a grade, and I know that potentially you want to show your best light, but at the same point, if every other day of the year and every year to come, that is what the school is, you have to represent it. And I think we've gone through a societal thing where we've basically gone, those kids need to go out somewhere else. Even if they're at home for the week, let's send them off to the Sea Life Centre and give them some ice cream. Do
That's
whatever
it. Put them in
whatever
a
cost.
minibus.
Exactly. Take them to the
But
park. Do whatever. And I think that's a real thing, isn't
let's
it? In
get some
terms of the,
senior members of staff who retired 2 years ago back to patrol the corridors, because some of the kids remember them and look up to them. I mean,
yeah.
a lot of these tricks, of course, Ofsted became aware of. They and they would say, right, who are your? They would look at the attendance register for year 9, let's say, and then they'd look at the biggest hitters in terms of exclusions or suspensions, as we now call them. I've been in education long enough, suspensions has come back. And they say, hang on a minute, this is interesting. If your students are absent, 30% of them are the ones who are also at the top of they wised up to all that. And I think it's another example of where, it's, I'm caricaturing. It is a caricature. But I think that serves the humour, but I don't like to think it doesn't detract from the sort of deeper resonances of the book.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing of the book tackles and delves into that satire and that caricature element, but also the ability or the lack of ability during those periods and actually in general that schools and leaders have in terms of its freedom and its choice and its approach to how they move into it. Because ultimately they're dancing the school dance or the government dance, and ultimately they have to play a role very differently. So ultimately, I've seen some of the best leaders become very different leaders during an Ofsted or approach when the pressure is on. And actually, does that link to actually teachers and leaders being their best selves if they're playing a character that actually isn't one that they normally play or ever wanted to play? They're promoted, they're put thrust to the top of the school or leaders or leadership structures, and then go, but we want you to behave in this way to go through it. And I think that's the thing of when you start to have a conversation and thinking about some of the leaders and some of the examples and even some of the teachers within there, is your best activity shackled by what the world and society and the challenges have become, rather than actually being able to guide and being able to influence and being able to change learning
Yes,
and
I
all
think
those kind of
that's
things?
right. I think that the simplest example of that for me is that member of staff who say, when I always see them if I can later on the corridor. If I've visited a school and I've been to somebody's lesson, if I've loved it, I'll find a way of catching them saying, by the way, your lesson, I didn't want to leave it. Because no one ever says that to them. But sometimes they'll say, oh, it was very noisy. I say, yes, that's a good thing. Because they think, the behaviour consultancy, it's got to be keep quiet, and it's got to be dead still. We've got to be bolted to our desks. And most of the inspectors, I'm told, will now, if they see children looking like they're nailed to the desks, they'll assume there's a problem. Because if there wasn't a problem, the adults would be more confident to allow them to do something more interactive and fun. I usually found when I took a risk with my students that they rewarded me for it. So, and also, there are enough people in Ofsted with their heads screwed on that you're more likely to get an inspector who is attuned to a style of leadership other than the autocratic, pace-setting, my way or the highway kind of leadership. There's plenty of that around, but not all Ofsted inspectors are draconian and narcissistic as Mr. Nally in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I completely lost my chain of thought there, but I'm just trying to think in terms of.
Oh, that's probably me.
No, it's fine. I always do this. I'm thinking about the next question and also the
Of
theme in
course.
here and everything else. But it's just linking into that whole thing of the fly on the wall and the individual within it, and the element of would it be any different if you were to put a different character Ofsted in there, person in there? What difference would that have made to the whole element of the book if it had been some? I don't know how to portray it, but ultimately somebody who had been through inspection and was 30 years and literally this was their last inspection, rather than somebody who was a bit more naive and fresh to it.
Well, that's where the comedy comes from, really. It's from having this very egotistical, very judgmental man, the man who looks at schools the way that a U-boat commander used to look at British shipping. That's how he gets described at one point. Uh, in contrast to this guy who was recently the head of a very inclusive primary school. He wants to make a difference. He joins OfSTED wanting to work with schools, collaborate, and so on. And it's the clash between those two characters that is perhaps the dramatically interesting thing, I think. Yes, perhaps that's where the real drama comes from, actually, rather than the comedy. I don't know whether that
Yeah,
answers
and
your
I think
question satisfactorily.
no, it does, and I think is it does this link it? What I'm trying to link in is, if people have read your old book, is the bits where there's now the funny humour and the satire linked to basically the understanding of human and student behaviour and leadership
Yeah, yeah.
behaviour linked into actually the funny anecdotes of some of the stories and some of the towns and some of the bits there. And does that link in? Is that, without even thinking about when you've re-looked at it, people who've read both then go, this really, I can tell that Steve, because of his experience in terms of behaviour and some
I
of
think
those
it
bits.
will. I've not made it explicit, but I think I talk in my education book, the one in the behaviour, that's behaviour book, published by Crown House. I talk about leading behaviour and managing behaviour, and I think you've got a lot of examples in Palmer's Inn Grammar School um, where adults are managing it, but they're not leading it. Like the IT guy who's sitting reading the newspaper while they're on all sorts of websites on screen. Um, they're they're just trying to keep the lid on rather than saying, right, this is the way we want students in our school to behave. And that is so relevant because, if I may say so about my own book, because I still go to schools where it's all about containment. It's all about, you go in and teach your stuff, but then when some behavior happens, try and manage it and do the same across the year group and the whole school, rather than this is the way we do things here. And that's the great thing in the Paul Dix approach and the Dave Whitaker's approach. In my approach, we're all in that sort of relational camp. Though I shudder to put myself on the same footing as those two great iconic guys. Um, and so it's about leading behaviour by saying, right, this is the way we do it here. And the way I put it in my book again, I as a teacher and we as a school, we're going to teach the behaviours we want to see. We're going to highlight them. We're going to model them in our own behaviour, and we're going to highlight them when we see them. And then you as an institution are coherently teaching behaviour. But the people in that school are rudderless because Harry Flanagan isn't providing the leadership they need. And they are just flapping about trying to manage it rather than lead it, in a nutshell.
And it shows in terms of and I suppose a question on leadership, I suppose, in terms of your opinion, what you've seen, that whole thing of, people talk about autonomy, and because I'm a leader and have been a leader for some time, and I always talk about I'm really heavily linked in terms of my approach to Brené Brown, authentic, vulnerable leadership. If you're familiar with Brené Brown's work and everything else, but at the same point, I always say to people, Claire is kind, and I make decisions and I lead at times when I have to, rather than let's just consult and let's give everybody a choice and do all that.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
people get
yeah,
confused between the two, and I think
yeah.
it's all that thing of the need for strong leadership comes out in the book, and yes, again linking back to the TV crew trying to manage and manipulate what a real school looks like during an Ofsted and everything else. That must have thrown a massive spanner in the works to the imaginary character, but at the same point, the challenge and the ability to make a decision, staff are waiting for it seems, and there's just nothing forthcoming, and they just run around and do whatever they want for the
They
best of their
do.
ability.
There's that wonderful old film from you're far too young to remember. This wonderful film from the 50s, or before I was born even, but it's Alistair Sim and Joyce Grenfell, Margaret Rutherford, and they've got this old public school, and they're so desperate to get pupils through the door. They've got two sets of two sets of parents being shown round, and they're trying to pretend that it's a boys' school to the boys' parents, and that it's a girls' school to the girls' parents. So they're feverishly taking down the rugger posts and putting up hockey posts and everything else in between, hiding the girls in cupboards, sort of thing, and hiding the boys. I mean, it's ridiculous fast, but I think on some level that probably infused the if it didn't make the weather in like outstanding, it certainly informed the climate. It's that sort of desperation that leads people to make really bad decisions. And yes, I recognise what you say about leadership. It's but again, that comes back to classroom teachers too. I see so many teachers, and I was one of them when I started. It was like, hey guys, let's get started, shall we, guys, be my friend, please. They want you to be in charge, benignly, from a place of care and empathy and warmth. But they want you to be in charge. And
Yeah, and I think
so I don't have to deal with people shouting at me so much. It's more trying to help early career teachers feel comfortable on the throne, feel comfortable wearing the cape, feel comfortable wearing the crown, if you see what I mean. Because the
which is
young
really,
people need you. They need you to be, they don't need another friend. They need a friendly adult, someone they can trust.
and that's really interesting. I remember when I started my teaching career in 2000, officially qualified
Yeah.
2006,
Wow.
I think it was.
Now I
I
feel old.
think, was it 2006? Yeah, 2006 I stepped into teaching PGCE. I did a postgraduate in FE. So I kind of learned, it was still a time where you could kind of teach for 2 years as you went through your PGCE
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything else. Wouldn't happen now. And then people said, you can't know that. You have to be qualified to teach. So I was like, I don't think the piece of paper really actually did anything for me. And sorry, Huddersfield University. Great curriculum and great job that you do. But actually, when I first stepped in, I did still step into that probably the end point of the dictator teacher and that person who is, I lead by not fear per se, but I lead by I am the information giver. I am the expert. You listen to me.
Yeah.
And there were still periods, where the outstanding educators were those that basically could control and manage and lead a class. Whereas over a period of time in my teaching career, that evolved to be facilitation and all those kind of things. But we are in danger of, because it's so diversive in regards to the types of people that we have. We have educators that are still following the old regime and people, but maybe there's that hybrid in between where it's actually about leading with confidence a class
Yes,
and
that's the word.
control with confidence. There's still an element of control, but still with the ability to facilitate learning and the Montessori approach in there, but still having that understanding of, you need to make sure that you command respect, not command through shouting, but command through intelligence
Yes.
and through support and through care
Yes.
and the Ewell
And that
Roberts
comes,
and
and
botheredness
that,
thing, that bit.
So as you know, we've been working with Clever for a number of years now as a partner for our Uprising events and also for our pre-Bet Wolfpack event this year. We're pleased to be continuing the partnership, and we're really excited in helping Clever gather insights from educators to inform their Classroom of the Future report.
Yeah, Clever's conducting this survey to better understand which EdTech tools and features educators believe most effectively support student learning in 2025 and beyond. Insights from this will directly inform product development, integrations, and professional development offerings from Clever and hopefully other EdTech vendors that see this. So by hearing from teachers like you about their top priorities, their biggest challenges, and views that are on top of mind issues like AI, data privacy, and all the things that go with that, Clever are aiming to spotlight what's truly working in classrooms today. So if you want to get involved, we'd love you to. Please complete this survey before it closes on May the 29th, 2025. It takes 3 to 5 minutes, and your responses are kept anonymous. The link is in the show notes.
Yeah, the botherness. That comes from doing the two at the same time. So rather than, well, I'll teach my stuff and then, I'll have a think about what am I going to do with behaviour? Am I going to be strict? Am I going to... No, rather that if you think, right, I am now, as the adult in the room, part and parcel of what I'm doing is I'm teaching behaviour. Because it's like Mark Finnett says, there'll be a culture, you may as well make it deliberate. So you're always going to be teaching behaviour, whether you mean to or not. So you may as well do that deliberately. And if you're doing that, if you're thinking throughout the lesson, what behaviours am I teaching? So what behaviours am I seen to notice? What behaviours do I talk about? what behaviours do I acknowledge, then you are in a good place to be leading rather than managing, and to get into that sweet spot where you're a respected, authoritative adult rather than a pushover or an authoritarian. That's my, we're going back to the other book. That's okay, because I think that's
No,
what people on this podcast would be interested in.
no,
That's all right.
but and at the same point, I think it's all that thing of whether you're a classroom educator, or whether you're an education leader. The thing that really shows as chaos really comes together between the stress of the inspection and the stress of the TV crew of actually trying to regain control when it's lost in every aspect of whether it's the educators trying to get hold of the learners, or whether it's the leaders trying to get hold of the educators and the staff within it, or whether it's the inspector trying to regain control of what he's trying to do. The TV crew clearly don't have any control at all in any part of it. But like, actually, I think it's a real story of people trying to regain control when control and trust is lost.
Yes. And that's funny. You know, we make ourselves look funny. I mean, I think about, I was in my first year of teaching, I've got this year 11 group, 50 years since they were then. It's 1986, would you believe? And
3 years. I was 3 years after I was born.
Thank you. And there's Claire, right? I've got a group of maybe 12 kids, and I've got them sitting around when we were reading a novel, I would always get them to sit like kind of boardroom style. It's only a small year 11 group, year 5 group at the time. And I'm reading, well, inevitably it was Of Mice and Men, because that's like the only book we ever read with kids at GCSE in those days, you know. And there's that moment, isn't there, where the teacher wants to stop and just check comprehension about something. Kids love that. Well, clearly not. So I said, we'll just stop for a moment. And Claire at the back went, "Oh, just get on with reading book." I went skit, Steve. I went nuts. How dare you play a payment? I must have looked ridiculous. I ended up in the deputy head's office being given a quality chat about the needs of our, so that's why I believe all this behaviour stuff so passionately, because I needed it. I'm not by nature, as you can see, I'm quite a volatile person. I'm not Mr. Placid. It didn't come naturally to me. So I think that's just one example where an education is made use of book. Well, it would have been a belly laugh for anyone just watching that, watching the steam come out of my ears and my face go purple. Poor girl, I felt for her. She probably, I think she survived, but they shouldn't really have that inflicted on them. So yeah, where people are desperate, they make bad decisions, and life just is funny. And sometimes, there's always humour is always lurking. Humour and tragedy, you can't separate the two really. There are things happening in my life that were tragic at the time, but goodness me, they're funny years later. And when you do behaviour training in the school, everyone's laughing because you're pointing out stuff and they're going, "Oh my God, I do that," So it's kind of I think it's intrinsic to the subject, really.
And I'm just trying to think about and get this right in terms of how the book is structured in regards to the realization of when you get the call or when you are notified, and what that looks like in terms of the build-up compared to the actual act and the actual dance that you have to dance. Is that based on the experience that you've had previously, in terms of the build-up, the pre and the during?
Yes, because I remember when it started, when OfSTED first was thought on, you got months and months of notice. And there was one of the rooms in the school I taught it was a classroom that got used just occasionally, and there were these tables in this room, and they were A4 lever arch files stacked 3 deep all across this room, and it was stuff that we were all busy writing at night. I was, working. Everybody was working stupid hours to produce all these lever arch files full of stuff for this enormous team, and because we had 3 or 4 months, the strain of anticipating our doom was terrible. I think it was much kinder when that got shifted to 2 weeks, and now of course it's almost, I'm ringing you from the end of the street, we're here, almost. I think maybe that's just gone a little bit. Perhaps it's a bit too much. But yes, I've seen it, and I was down in Essex not long ago, and I was due to have a discussion with her head, and she said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but I've just had the call." I said, "Say no more. We'll do this over the phone another time." And I just, went and got the train home. Once that call comes, everything is dropped. And I've seen firsthand the I've seen the effect on people emotionally. It's not good. It's not good, which
Yeah.
is why I felt I had to, as well as making people laugh, I had to deal with those darker things.
Yeah, and tell
Couldn't
me,
ignore those.
yeah, and I think that's the thing in terms of just as you were just telling me in terms of like the different stages of how it was months, now it's down
Yeah.
to minutes or let's say days. Actually, the added pressure from both sides of that of actually trying to get everything, because ultimately if they're just coming in and they just want access and they just want a folder that's now online, though we're probably not in the age of printing off. But if OfSTED is still asking for those, is there enough time within the realms of doing everything else as a school leader and an educator and everything else in terms of a job role, to do so, to prepare appropriately, to provide the evidence, because they're not just wanting to come in and look at lessons and having a couple of meetings now. They want to see some real detail that's so difficult and takes hours and days to actually prepare, even though you've probably got a couple of days, compared to prolonging the inevitable. Even if you were given a month, let's be honest, if you're not great, you can't hide everything. Maybe a few skeletons
No,
in the
you
closet,
can't.
but you can't
You
hide
can't.
Narnia behind the cupboard often.
No, you can't. And also, there's that thing of, well, sorry, but the data says this. Well, it's almost like, why did you bother visiting then? Yeah, I
Yeah,
think Martin actually says, well, why don't we just fail them from Whitehall if we could do it? Why even bother visiting if they're damned? If it's only the results we're interested in, why bother coming?
and
Um,
Ofsted did go, even without the recent changes, they did go through that thing of, we don't look at data, we look at what we want to see, what's really happening.
yeah,
But then, to me, I don't think that ever changed. They could really make the decisions.
they could.
I'm probably I'm going to get myself up. I still think, without even coming into the schools, based on the data that they are provided, they would and could make those decisions right there and then without prolonging the dance.
But I suppose if it were down to just one word, I think it's probably a good thing that that's
The
gone.
changes, absolutely.
I think if you're lucky with an Ofsted, it's a really high quality education consultancy. If you've got a team that's knowledgeable, that's got the right bank of experiences, and has an empathetic style, I think you've got a great educational consultancy. That's what it really should be, and it should be. Which I don't know whether this is still the ethos of it, but it certainly was at one time. We're checking your self-evaluation. You tell us who your good teachers are. You send us to your, and again, this you get the leadership team talking about this in the staff room during the inspection. Like, where should we send them? Because I know one who was very very successful head in Wakefield who says to the inspectors, "Oh, go anywhere, go anywhere," and he did, and it wasn't good, and he ended up himself getting what was a satisfactory then, which would be requires improvement now, which I think was a good change. Because if it ain't good, it can't be satisfactory, can it? I used to complain that when we had these pink cards we had to write about kids who are on report, and it was very good, excellent, good, or satisfactory. Like, well, if you good, how can I say satisfactory? It makes sense to me. I'm a bit on the spectrum, well, that's what my partner thinks anyway. I tend to be very literal, but I think it probably helps.
It's a really difficult thing, isn't it, actually? Because where do we send them? I worked in FE, and one of the campuses that I was at, I kind of led an offset inspection. For anybody listening, this was a true thing of we created a path, knowing who were the outstanding teachers, who were the ones to avoid, and all those kind of things. And you brag
Yeah,
rated, and you did all that kind of thing, and
yeah.
you wanted to make sure that what you expected and what you were told by because FE is massive, and everything else.
So the whole thing becomes like Monopoly. Don't throw a double six. We'll land on Mayfair and we're screwed.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's this red. Don't go and see Mr. So and So. Keep him away. And that's insane. And again, it just leads to comedy. It's that desperation.
but it's true. Like literally, it's funny
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's true of that thing of, don't go see that person, and you think, but then in the real world you then go, but we put learners in front of that person and do nothing about it for every
Exactly.
day of the week,
Exactly.
whether it's because of the uni, and that's one of the things in terms of leading in today's thing.
Yes.
That's really difficult because as a leader, you probably know there are things you can't fix it all. In OfSTED, you really get to be you get to kind of call it all out because you then go, don't put me in front of that person, don't do that, let's not do that. But then you've got then you're thinking, what experience are these young people having for the
Yes.
rest of their experience with you, whether that's
Yes.
in a school
There's a
for a
link
long.
to
Yeah,
Yes, there's a link to recruitment here. Because my own children went to a supposedly outstanding school. Again, it was in Yorkshire. I won't say which one. And I had an immense respect for the head teacher. He was the executive head of another school they'd taken under their wing. They were really helping, unlike the guy in the book, who I like to satirise. The Academy Trust in the book. But this guy, I've got enormous respect for. He's now retired. Except he did confess to me when I did a little bit of consultancy in the school while my kids were still there. And he did confess that Mr. F, the maths teacher, well, yeah, he's a bit old school. He was a minor, and he's near the end of his career. And this guy was a nightmare. I mean, he was obsessed with the length of people's skirts. He belittled my son and made him sit at the front because he hadn't understood the homework, which completely destroyed his involvement in maths for the rest of his school career. And yet the head teacher knew this guy was like this. He knew he was draconian and authoritarian and nitpicking and negative, but he didn't address it. And I really feel that sort of stuff has got to be addressed, because if you allow that, then all those, I'm going to schools and they've got aspiration written in letters 3 inches deep. They've got 3 feet deep. Inspiration. I haven't seen perspiration yet, but I might do one day. And I've sometimes said to head teachers, are these the banned words? Because I'm not seeing these words. I'm not hearing them in the classroom. When I'm feeling very brave, I say things like that. But, if you sign up for these values, you can't afford to have these naysayers. When I said a link to recruitment, it's this: the guy's subject was maths. Now, find me a maths teacher, right? With respect to all maths teachers out there, because many of them are fantastic, they are so hard to recruit that there's the old joke that the criteria for being appointed is having a pulse, because it's just hard to find them. And if he'd sacked Mr. F or let him go or suggested early retirement to him, there might not have been another body to put in place.
very similar to my experience in FE. And again, when I say FE, because I was a career person. I spent my whole career in the same organisation in 17 years. It was Joseph Priestley and then Leeds City College, and then became the Lumen Education Group in Yorkshire. But so I'm not going to call out any individual, but certain areas you would have exactly. I'm guessing this is probably the same for further education, maths in school, and some certain subjects where construction, engineering, motor vehicle, those kind of things, where it's like we know that they're IT potentially, but we know that they're challenging. They're not the best teachers and everything else, but they'd be expensive and you can't recruit to that bit. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe just don't run that program anymore then. Yeah, I know it might bring some more money, it might be some funding. There must be a better way than just because those people are hard to replace or more expensive to replace or something that we allow it to happen. And leadership is really difficult because it's that measure up of keeping the function and the business running compared to actually running how you want it to be. And if we're running them like businesses, let's be honest, those people would be gone.
Yeah. So I to speak up to them, I have met some of these guys. These are the guys who sit in the back of the room when you're doing training. They're in their Fred Perry shirts.
Yeah.
Polo shirts, I should say. The black polo shirts with the logo, because they're doing the various trades. And sometimes they're fantastic because they've got the life experience, they've got the grounded approach, and they're exactly the right people to work with some of these lads for whom school did not work. But sometimes, yeah, now then, what have you got to tell me? And I get great satisfaction out of winning those guys over during a training session.
Yeah.
But yes, I
And
felt
maybe,
obliged to stick up for them.
and absolutely, ultimately, what I would say to, and maybe it's the shackles of the system for some of these individuals. Some of them probably should be in the classroom and want to just read out of a book or basically just talk at people. And let's be honest, my daughter's 4. If I, at any point, put her in a situation where anybody talks to her for longer than 30 seconds, she'd be off, she'd be done. So these people that were probably outdated and just speaking for too long in education. But actually, we still, and I heard a report that we still need to get rid of people as in school. So again, away from construction, writing outcomes and learning objectives from the board. I'm like, right, so maybe we're shackled, and it's a societal shackle in education where we've created and then say, but you have to teach in this way. I'm not being funny, but if we inspire, infuse, engage, enhance, facilitate, support these young people to be the best, why does it make a difference if they can't write a
Don't you
lesson
think
plan?
that's something to do with where the school is on its journey? Like if you've got a school that's had a very bad OfSTED, that's usually and they realise, right, I can think of a school I work with at the moment that's like this. Everything's a mess. Right, we've got to set a standard here. And so you get that, right? We are going to have I do, you do, we do, or who do, you do, voodoo, whatever it is, there's this, we're all going to teach to this structure because we've just got to get this ship sailing in the right direction. And then maybe 6 months, 9 months down the road, those things get a bit more related. They say tighten for good, loosen for outstanding.
Yeah.
I remember reading in the Times Ed once, the guy that ran Sir Robert Clack down in Dagenham, where I'm from originally, Barking way. He said for about a month you get excluded for running on the corridor, but it was only a month. It was just about a new regime saying we've got to take charge here, because it was pretty wild if I remember the article right. I'm sure it's an excellent school now. Well, I know it is. So I think there's something about the journey you're on with that.
Absolutely, and I think it's that whole, and for a leader that must be really difficult in regards to not cultivating every field and every classroom and allowing rainforest, because ultimately some people need strength and support to those must-haves. But with any school, you shackle too much, and those outstanding teachers then go, well, why are you telling me how to do what I've been doing for positively? And it's all that the leadership thing of don't treat everybody exactly the same. Identify some of the challenges and support some of those positive challenges.
I agree with that, except with the one caveat, which is when the school decides, right, we are going to take the Paul Dix formula of ready, respectful, safe, or we are going to do these certain behaviour things. I think it's really important that the staff that don't necessarily need them do use that language, because then the danger is the ones who do, the staff who do talk the new language, that can look like a badge of failure. Yeah. So with a thing like that, I think it's really important. Do you mind if I wave the other book?
No, please do. Sorry, and we're covering across both.
There we are.
But yeah, please do.
Since we're talking about both, I thought I'd just wave this one. There you go.
Absolutely.
And there we go. Done.
Yeah, and
commercial
I think,
over. Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. But yeah, and I think the thing that really jumps out of the book is real problems, but real funny. I think that's the thing where it unpicks some real challenges that we'll probably, if you're in education and you read this and you go, yes, I can see leaders or colleagues or friends or educators that we work with or particularly, probably not, unless you have been on to Educating Yorkshire or Educating Essex or something. You've probably not been in there with a TV crew. But that side of it, you will see it. But ultimately, it makes you laugh while you're considering some of the challenges and some of the things, and you go, that definitely needs to change. Oh, yeah, I can. Even last week I saw that. But obviously you go, well, that's a funny spin on it.
That's, I think, real funny, what did you say? Real funny, real...
real example. Was it? I can't remember what I said, but it was basically, it's real. It's what people have lived. It's real experiences, but real funny.
Well, I will take that as a review. Thank you.
Well, I'll write. I'll send it on email. It's not a problem at all. I'll get it done.
That's all right.
We always, in terms of this season, we always finish
Yes. Yeah.
with quick fire questions and always go with the same. So let's keep it as quick fire as we can, Steve, if that's all right. I'll go. Normally, I go first, and Ben goes second, and we mix it up. We won't do. I'll do all three today. But what is one outdated educational practice we need to abandon?
I would say lumping all your behaviours, problems to your students your students who you see as behaviour problems together and creating a one unteachable bottom set. That's probably
setting.
Like pulling a gun and firing it at your own forehead, really.
Yeah, that teacher must have a challenge. Absolutely. How should we measure learning success beyond grades?
Well, I would say if you're going to change the way you measure success, you've got to change the way you set up the task in the first place. For example, modelling. My old colleague Keith Feely, if you're out there, Keith, hello. He always said, why don't we teach modelling? Or let's choose a language, Spanish. Let's close the curriculum for a week and just immerse them. And just have a week where no one's been out. You'd have to take certain students aside and provide this because some students are going to panic, I know. But if you were doing that, then it'd be pretty clear by the end of the week for who this is successful. You almost wouldn't. So that's my answer to that. And maybe have the kids assess the lessons as well.
Real student decision making rather than just a tip to the hat and a thing. And the final one is, what would you want our listeners, or one thing you want our listeners to think about and remember?
For the conversation about the book,
yes, yeah,
I would say that I'd like them to believe that it's funny. Find out for yourselves, folks. But it's funny, but it is a caricature, and there are some really good people working in an organisation like OfSTED as well as in schools. So I think to have a rounded view of everything.
Absolutely, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much too.
No, thank you. And we've jumped through both books, so both books will be linked into the show notes. So go get your copy of both of those.
That one too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got mine here.
Oh,
here we go. Absolutely. But yeah, yours is probably
on the cover.
Yeah, yours is probably a bit more tidy than mine. Mine's got pencil in it and sticky notes. I went with pink and yellow on this one. Nice. I tried to mix it up. But yeah, and if you want and you love a good laugh, don't forget. Hopefully by the time this airs, there might be still a last few tickets kicking about. We have our Edufuturist Uprising event in Manchester. With the awards, that you can go vote. Hopefully, it's closing in a couple of weeks, so it's probably just missed it, but you'll be able to see. And in anticipation, we will see the winners and the highly commended on the 26th of June. Go get your tickets at edufuturist.uprising or /uprising. Go grab your ticket, and it will be an absolute laugh. Lots of drinks, pie, and everything else to go with it. A very northern event like
Sounds great.
So so Steve, absolute pleasure, mate, and
thank you.
See you soon, everybody.
I look forward to talking to you again. Cheers.
Shaping the next generation, dancing to the rhythm, catching every beat. Together we embrace the futures at our feet. The futures at